By the end of the 6th century before Christ, the mighty Persian Empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River and from Upper Egypt to the Aral Sea. Its dominion seemed to have no limits until in the year 499, the Greek cities of Asia Minor decided to rebel against the authority of King Darius. Following the instructions of Aristagoras, the tyrant of Miletus, the rebels invaded Sardis, the capital of the Persian satrapy, and set fire to its sacred buildings. That affront would not go unanswered. Years later, in the spring of 480, King Xerxes, son of Darius, advanced toward Athens with the largest army ever seen until then. His fleet was impressive and his determination unbreakable. He wanted to avenge the insults suffered at Sardis and the subsequent defeat at the Battle of Marathon, both of which had occurred during his father's reign. But he also had another objective: to subjugate the Greeks and incorporate them into his empire as a new Persian satrapy. When this news reached Sparta, one of its two kings, Leonidas, made a decision that would change the course of history. He decided to give his life and that of the members of his personal guard to stop the invading army at the pass of Thermopylae, the natural gateway to central Greece. Spartan society was distinguished by three fundamental traits: its educational system, its military organization, and its profound religiosity. This last characteristic often limited the capacity for action of its troops. A clear example occurred in the summer of 490, when the Spartan army responded too late to Athens' call for help to participate in the Battle of Marathon. The reason? They could not interrupt the festivals dedicated to Apollo Carneus, as it would have been an impious act. That summer of 480, the Greek cities prepared to face the Persian invasion gathered in the temple of Poseidon in Corinth. There, they formulated a religious oath that would give rise to what would later be known as the Hellenic League. Although they were a minority, their strategy was clear. They had to advance and wait for the Persians at one of the narrow mountain passes they would have to cross. Only thus would they have any possibility of success against the overwhelming number of enemies. Leonidas presented his arguments before the Spartan institutions, but once again the Carnean festivals stood in the way. He only obtained a special dispensation to take with him his personal guard, 300 elite Spartiates. For him, that mission was not just a service to society, but a personal sacrifice that would grant him eternal fame. Religious factors also played an important role in this decision. It is said that the Oracle of Delphi revealed to a Spartan delegation that one of their two kings must die if they wanted to prevent the Persians from occupying Lacedaemonian territory. Upon learning of the prophecy, Leonidas made sure that it would be he, and not the other King Leonidas, who would carry out this sacrifice. It would be the first time that a Spartan king would die in combat. At that moment, the Persian Empire had already subjugated Thrace and Macedonia thanks to the campaigns of General Mardonius in 492. This meant that, after leaving his domains, Xerxes would first enter Thessaly, whose local aristocracies had decided to facilitate his advance. Therefore, the most suitable place to resist was the pass of Thermopylae, located at the southern end of Thessaly. The pass of Thermopylae was located on the coast of the Maliac Gulf, facing the northwest tip of the island of Euboea. There, the southern end of the Pindus mountain range, the true backbone of Greece, approached the coast so closely that it left a very reduced space between the sea and the mountains. In antiquity, before the rivers filled the area with sediments, that pass was a defile about 1,300 meters long in its central part, with a width that varied between 15 and 30 meters. Leonidas trusted that this narrowness would nullify the numerical advantage of the Persians. by preventing them from deploying all their troops. Moreover, having a cliff on the right flank eliminated one of the weak points of the Greek phalanxes, since the hoplites held their shields with their left arm. But the most important reason was that this area favored a joint strategy between land and sea. The strait between the north coast of Euboea and the continent offered an ideal battlefield for the Greek triremes, which could face the Persian ships there and prevent them from attacking the rear of the Hellenic army. The selection of the 300 Spartiates who would accompany Leonidas was carried out with great care. The men who formed the personal guard of the kings of Sparta were known as hippes, knights, although they served as hoplites in the center of the phalanx alongside their sovereign. This detachment was composed of 300 members chosen after an intense competition among Spartiates between 20 and 29 years old who had to demonstrate their bravery, their skill with weapons, and excellent physical preparation. But those selected to fight at Thermopylae had something more that distinguished them. All were aware that they were going on a suicide mission. The code of honor instilled through the agoge, the Spartan educational system, made them consider that there was nothing more shameful than being pointed out as a coward, something that happened if one returned alive after a lost battle. The survivor would have colored patches sewn on his cloak, would be rejected in the communal dining halls, syssitia, would lose his civic rights and all hope of marrying the daughter of an equal. In fact, 2 of those chosen by Leonidas, Pantites, and Aristodemus returned alive due to different circumstances, and neither could bear such dishonor. Pantites hanged himself as soon as he arrived in Sparta, and Aristodemus, in the subsequent Battle of Plataea in 479, separated from his phalanx and sought death at the hands of the Persians. Given that everyone knew they were going to die, Leonidas applied an additional criterion to select his 300. Each one had to have at least one male son to perpetuate his lineage. It is possible that he also wanted to personally verify the strength of the women who were going to be widowed. Leonidas himself met these requirements. His young wife Gorgo had given him a son named Plistarchus, who would become king after the regencies of Cleombrotus and Pausanias. As for Gorgo's reaction to her husband's imminent death, she demonstrated the same determination as always. In the height of summer of the year 480, Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, accompanied by about 1,000 Periwesi and another 1,000 non-combatant helots, set out on the road to Thermopylae. First, they crossed the eastern part of the Peloponnesian Peninsula, where about 4,000 more warriors joined them. Then they crossed the Isthmus of Corinth and traveled through Boeotia, a region that barely contributed 400 Thebans and 700 Thespians. Finally, about 1,000 Phocian and Locrian combatants joined the Greek army, the peoples most threatened by the Persian advance. In total, Leonidas had about 7,000 men to face an army of almost 200,000 Persians. Upon arriving at Thermopylae, the Greeks camped next to an ancient wall built by the inhabitants of Phocis and reconstructed it to strengthen their position. After several days of waiting due to a storm that shipwrecked part of the Persian fleet off the coast of Magnesia, King Xerxes sent a final message to Leonidas: "Surrender your weapons." The Spartan king's response was laconic and forceful: "Come and take them." Then began one of the most epic battles in history, which would last for 3 days of intense fighting. In his initial attack, Xerxes launched the Median and Sicyan contingents against the Greeks. From the first clash, the tactical and armament superiority of the compact Greek phalanxes became evident. According to Herodotus, the Asians kept falling and being replaced by new troops, never ceasing in their effort despite suffering enormous losses. Thus, it was demonstrated before the Persian monarch himself that although he had many combatants, few of them were true soldiers. Next, it was the Immortals, King Xerxes' personal guard, who took the initiative. But the greater length of the Greek spears and the maneuvers of the Lacedaemonians made them suffer the same fate. Irritated by the disaster, Xerxes ordered his fleet to face the Athenians and Aeginetans at Cape Artemisium, with the intention of landing behind the Greek lines. However, the Persian ships had not yet reorganized after the shipwreck caused by the storm, and the naval battle ended without a clear victor. At the end of the second day of combat, when Xerxes was most desperate before that unexpected resistance, a local traitor named Ephialtes revealed a hidden path to him. That dishonorable betrayal unleashed one of King Leonidas' most noble gestures, his decision not to force his allies to participate in that collective suicide. According to the version most accepted by historians, when the Persians discovered the Anapaea path, which climbed the mountain and emerged beyond the Greek rear, Leonidas allowed most of the Greek combatants to return to their cities, perhaps thinking that later they would have the opportunity to defend their own. The king remained on the battlefield with his surviving Spartiates, who were the majority, with his Perioeci, with the Helot servants, and with the warriors of Phocis. While the Spartans could not conceive of returning alive from a lost battle, the Thespians and Thebans had their own reasons to fight to the end. At dawn on the third day of battle, when Leonidas and his men learned of the Persian flanking movement along the Anapaea path and understood that their end was near, they deployed against the barbarians, according to Herodotus's account, all the energy they had left, with reckless valor. There came a moment when most had their spears already broken, but they continued killing Persians with their swords. During this heroic deed, Leonidas fell. After his death, a fierce struggle broke out over his corpse. The Greeks managed to recover it and forced their enemies to retreat up to 4 times. But in the end, when all the defenders of the pass had died, Xerxes descended from his throne and walked among the lifeless bodies. Such was his anger against Leonidas that he ordered his head to be cut off and nailed to a stake. Many days later, when the Persian troops had left, a group of Spartans was able to access Leonidas' body and decided to bury his already decomposed remains right there. 40 years later, Sparta sent another detachment to recover his bones, transport them to the city, and honor the hero with a state funeral. Over his tomb, a stela was erected with his name and that of the 300 Spartiates who fell beside him. The Leonidaion, a religious building constructed near the Acropolis, became the ritual center of new annual religious festivals, in which Leonidas was worshipped as a semi-divine hero. The result of the Battle of Thermopylae was impressive. More than 20,000 Asian soldiers, mostly elite troops, died during the 3 days the confrontation lasted. The Greeks discovered the vulnerability of Xerxes' army and fleet and began to trust in their possibilities. Without that inspiring battle, it would not have been possible to achieve a month later the naval victory at Salamis, nor a year later the definitive elimination of the Persian expedition on the plain of Plataea. The resistance of Leonidas and his men in the narrow pass of Thermopylae thus became one of the most extraordinary examples of valor, sacrifice, and determination in the history of humanity. Their deed not only changed the course of the war between Greeks and Persians, but marked a before and after in the history of Western civilization.